Hey, good people of the world, it's your girl Keeley. I'm here on my own tonight, so obviously I'm going to be kind of tinkering with this computer as well to ensure that I get the video in the right places. So tonight I'm going to be talking all things about how to feel good enough, because I know that when we don't feel good enough about ourselves, life gets tricky. And if you're anything like me or anybody that I work with, I'm sure that you want to live a different life. You want to live an abundant life. You want to live a life where you can be who you're truly meant to be, like at some kind of gut level. I'm sure you may feel a kind of uncomfortableness that actually I'm not where I'm supposed to be. So if you're rewatching this on the rewind, put hashtag replay in there for your girl Key. So I know I like getting those little dings every so often. It's like, okay, yeah, someone's watching, and hopefully the material may just inspire you. So don't forget to do that. Sadly, I don't have my team of assistants with me here today, so I'm doing this on my solo. So do bear with me as I just get to grips and make sure I'm sharing this content in places where one hopes it will be warmly received. But we know that, you know, this kind of material isn't for everybody, because that's the spice of life, right? That's the variety of life. However, feeling good enough is really important in terms of the quality, how it sets the tone for the quality of our life. And that isn't just about intimate relationships. Intimate relationships are only one dimension within that. This is also about how it sets the tone for our relationships, it sets the tones for our jobs, it sets the tone for our careers. And so it is something that is really, it pervades the whole of our lives. But for me, where it shows up most acutely, where it shows up in a kind of way that's sometimes like undeniable, is it shows up in our intimate relationships. And well, when that happens, that puts us in a very interesting place. I'm trying to share this video to my homepage and I can't, because I don't know, I can't. Anyhow, let's not worry about that. So, not feeling good enough, I'm taking any of your questions, queries about how that impacts on your life. And the reason why I am so passionate about exploring not feeling good enough, because let's say for the 20 years that I've been in training and as a helping professional, this issue, give your girl a heart, give your girl a like, because I need that feedback. I really do well when I get engagement. It really helps to inspire me. The reason why not feeling good enough is a part of, one, my Feel Loved program. Why it's a topic is because I see it come up time and time and time again, from my work in prisons, where I worked as a probation officer delivering accredited offender behaviour programs, and it just affects all of us as humans, and how we feel about ourselves has incredible bearing upon the quality of our lives. So I'm very much passionate about helping people to explore how they can feel good about who they are. In my therapeutic practice, it's about understanding where the roots of not feeling good enough has come from, like what's fed that. Give you a thumbs up, a little bit of a heart. I love that interaction. And get in therapy, are we wanting to understand that to you, to show you what I've taken from whatever you've told me, in order to see if you'll be like, oh, that makes sense. That's why I do that here, because that actually stems from things that may have happened in my past. But when I'm coaching individuals or working in groups, it's always definitely about how can we move forward. So we don't look at the past when we're coaching. We're like, okay, this is where you are now. How can we move on in our lives? Yes, thank you, sister. I appreciate the love coming from Uxbridge. how can we move on so that we can start to change that, so we can start to rate who we are, so we can start to appreciate the person that we are? Because, you know, there is so much potential, there is so much greatness in you that I truly fundamentally believe in. The greatness of humans, the potential. So I come from, I've studied the human potential aspect of psychology, which wasn't available to me when I was working in prisons. They studied a very different model. And I think it's probably one of the reasons why I work for myself, because I think I come from like thinking about humans as having loads of strengths. However, I'm very much aware that our past hurts can also hinder how we feel about ourselves. When we don't feel good enough, when we don't rate who we are, what will happen ultimately in our intimate relationships, because that's the area of specialism that I am passionate about as a therapist, is not feeling good enough will show up in a multitude of ways in our intimate relationships. But ultimately, it will be most present in terms of our capacity to tolerate nonsense. So if we don't rate who we are, and our self-esteem is derived because Bob wants me, and I'm so surprised a man like Bob, who's so great and wonderful, would be interested in someone like me, then our self-esteem is hooked up with that person. And if Bob changes his mind, as humans often do, and we are entitled to change our mind, Bob doesn't have to love you relentlessly for the rest of his days, then it can be very devastating for us should Bob decide to up and leave and go off with Mandy. And we're literally watching our self-esteem go out the door. And I think when we are dependent and on someone else for validation, for someone else to big us up, or we don't love ourselves, when relationships end, it can be very tricky for us. And I write about that in my book, Why Love Hurts, the challenges of being purely our confidence and self-esteem coming from somebody else, because people are entitled to change their minds. So what does that mean for you? And if you've got any questions or queries out there, I'll be glad to take them. As I said, it gets lonely here on my own. And, you know, ultimately, if you're not feeling good enough, it is a precursor for abusive relationships. And why is that? Why is that? Is because it means that your capacity for self-regard is limited. So often people may not have any limits to how they'll you know, if people get a horse, they will ride it. And so if you are also someone who doesn't do no, no can be a particular challenge, because it means that when we perpetually say yes to someone and we never say no, it means that we can sometimes put ourselves in predicaments where we had a good intention, you know. For example, I know, say if you lent someone some money, it's a good intention, but you may have needed it, but for whatever reason, you just couldn't say no. And sometimes the people who I work with, I think we're often sensitive, kind, caring individuals who often attract takers. And sometimes we're not so great at saying no, and we say yes. And sometimes we avoid or don't honor our instincts. And when we don't honor our instincts or our gut reactions to situations, this was something we was talking about in the Feel Loved group today, it can often result in us giving to the point where we make ourselves incredibly vulnerable or put ourselves in difficult situations. And if that speaks to someone you know, probably not you, or someone you know, or you have a question about how to start feeling good about who you are, ask your girl Key, because If you know anything about my story, you'll know that I started life not feeling great in my adult life, not feeling great about who I was, needing validation from others and being desperate in my attempts to be validated by somebody else, because for a multitude of reasons, my self-esteem was particularly low. Didn't look like it on the surface, you know, everything looked okay. But internally, how I felt about me really showed up. The lack of self-worth, the lack of regard I had for myself showed up in a multitude of ways, even through my experience of education, not thinking I was bright, in the kind of work that I was doing. So it's unskilled work. You know, I worked at IKEA for I worked at IKEA for 10 years, on the checkouts, graduating from a cashier to a checkout supervisor. And then during that process, I kind of began to think, you know, you ever been doing a job and you just, something in you knows that you could do better. And in your head, you're like, but how can I do better? I've got no qualifications. I've only got GCSEs, and they were pretty abysmal. But there was this part of me that just knew I could do better. Big up, Christina. Thank you. Sounds like me. Did you know, Christina, did you know that a part of you just knew you could do better? Well, if you can resonate with that, girl, listen, for whatever reason, that day, I remember the day vividly, and I was digging down in the yellow baskets at IKEA, because all you guys go around IKEA picking up stuff, and then you get to the checkouts and you throw it out. Muggins here had to pick it up. And I just knew I could do better. I don't know where it came from, because I had no evidence to suggest that I could do better. But intuitively, at a gut level, something happened. And well, I write about it in my book. I call it my epiphany, when I just knew, like, I had to do better. And at that time, I was in a very tricky circumstance. But something in me, a seed of hope was sowed in me. And I remember I started to read self-help books. And one of the key things that self-help book, it just stayed with me, is do not worry about the hows. Often when you've got a dream, or you're trying to achieve something, or you're trying to move out of your current circumstance, and you have a dream in you, and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to do that. And this one cassette said, do not worry about the hows. And I was exceptionally comforted by that, because it just meant that don't worry how you're going to bring your dreams to life. At the time, my auntie was a social worker, and I'd secretly always wanted to do that as well. But this voice in me, this inner voice, was like, you can't do that. You haven't got any GCSEs. I don't know if anybody here, like at school, felt like if you failed your GCSEs, you were going to be on the scrap heap of life, like you'd never earn a crumb. And so I kind of, that indoctrination, that if you don't leave school with GCSEs, had really shaped my thinking. And so I had to overcome that inner voice. And it's really interesting. Like, today is World Suicide Day, a very difficult day. And I was trying to think about doing a video about that. And I have to be mindful, you know, of the work I do and the trust that is put in me. But one thing I know, I believe about suicide, from my experience working in this field, is that our inner voice is crucial, and we need to build a relationship with that voice. That inner voice, I believe, is our harsh inner critic. And if we've got a harsh inner critic that is grueling and cruel and unkind to us, then that voice is a voice that we need to befriend and understand, because it also has a message for us to learn from. That's probably aside, but to link that back to today, the harsh inner critic is also a voice inside of us that fuels us never feeling good enough. Interestingly, I'm reading the last draft of the workbook for my Feel Loves workshop coming up. And we talk about in the workshop the inner Care Bear. So if you have a harsh inner critic, your harsh inner critic will fuel not feeling good enough. It's the type of voice, the things, my voice, it can still kick off sometimes, is key. How are you ever going to do that? You've left school with no GCSEs. You're never going to write a book. You didn't get a C in English. It's something that, a voice that always puts you down. It's a dream killer voice. No matter what you're trying to do, it always has something negative to say. And the harsh inner critic is actually a fear-based voice. In my workshop, my workshop is called Feel Loved. We talk about that inner voice being Cruella de Vil. And for anyone who's been to the workshop, you'll know that I pay very close attention to our harsh inner critic, because that voice is fundamental to us living a good life, our #best life, because that's what everybody want to live, right? Okay, so if we want to live our #best life, understanding our harsh inner critic, the voice within, is fundamental. This is the voice that fuels self-harm. And we know the ultimate act of self-harm is when someone takes their life. And the reason I'm acknowledging that is because it's World Suicide Day today. So that inner critic voice, we need to get to understand. So here I make a list, and I want my clients, whoever's working with me at my workshop, we start to list what are the awful things you say about you, because it's highly likely when we never feel good enough, we say some dark stuff to ourselves that we would probably not say to anybody else. You wouldn't tell a friend the names you call yourself, yet for whatever reason, well, because it often goes on in our heads and it never comes out and gets scrutinized, we never get a real handle on what we say to ourselves. And that inner voice is fundamental to build a relationship. That harsh inner critic is the voice of often fear, and if we could pay attention to it and not just listen to it, so many of us believe the negative voices in our head, the harsh inner critic, that it is why we never feel good enough. And so developing developing a capacity to answer back. So I remember when I was at IKEA and I told my boss I wanted to go part-time because I was going to go to university, and I was told, he looked at me and was like, I'll believe that when I see it. And I remember, like, that statement fueled my fear. Like, I couldn't do it. I wasn't good enough. And so I realized that I had to be very careful about who I spoke my dreams to, because thank you, Joanna Taverner, my sister. I didn't realize how important it is until quite recently. My sister, I would totally encourage you, and thank you for sharing the video, to get familiar with that voice. And if you want to come to my workshop, sis, like, it's something that I explore in depth, because we need to give that space. The harsh inner critic, our internal dialogue, really sets the tone for our life, because that is how we communicate with ourselves. That, when you see our behavior, so if I know today I went and had lunch in a coffee shop, in the cafe locally, because I'd been in my office all day. That behavior you'll see me come out of my office and walk over there, but there would have been a decision-making process that would have been my internal dialogue. And so when we don't know our entire dialogue, or our entire inner dialogue is just fed by Cruella de Vil, that harsh inner voice, then life can be pretty tricky. And anyone who works with me knows that I'm like, bring that book, come talk to me, let me hear what that voice has to say, because that voice carries on the way it does inside your head. And if I was your therapist, I'm like, you tell me what that voice says to you. Let's have it, because we want to move on. And I know you have dreams, aspirations, and goals for your life that you want to achieve, But because this voice just goes on a rampage, telling you all kinds of untruths, you believe it. And what happens is we never take the step. We desire, we want change, but the voice is so intense. We give into it and we stay in our comfort zone. The same comfort zone that and then what happens is we get very scared and frightened of stepping out of our comfort zone. And if we ever try to cue the voice, 3, 2, 1, the inner critic will soon kick off with a multitude of things, fear-based statements to stay. And so one of the tactics that I employ when we write down what you are saying to yourself is, do you have any evidence to support what you're saying about yourself? You know, the reality of a harsh inner critic is often, if we're looking at the fundamentals, I don't know if people want to do deep here or superficial, but you know, Keeley's gone off the reading list, let's say, is that voice is often internalized from significant people that have been around us in our young years when we were growing into ourselves. So they say 0 to 7 is when our personality is being developed. And so if we were told harsh, cruel things, if we were put down, you know, the little subtle put downs that people levy at children, don't actually realize that can mean that we may play small. And there's a book that I'm a big fan of. You can actually find it on my website under the resources section, called Playing Big. And if this topic speaks to you, if you're someone who has played small in others in order for, well, sometimes others to not know how great and genius you are, or because you don't actually believe in yourself, it's a wonderful place to start. I'll put a link below, but remember, go to keyforchange.com and you'll find on my resources page that book called Think Playing Big as opposed to playing small, because there is a greatness and potential within you that if you choose to take small baby steps, and I'm a big fan of small baby steps. Remember, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. Rest in peace, Nipsey Hussle. I love that analogy. That what we need to do if we don't feel good enough, so let me go into my 3 tips, is firstly, if we don't feel good enough, is to start to decide, like, what is your dream? What is your aspiration for yourself? Now, if you're anything how I used to be, your harsh inner critic will start to kick off and it will say X and Y and Z and why you can't have this. Either write down what it says so it gets its air, let it have its air. Okay, cool, that's my fears, write that down. But then give yourself space to articulate what is the aspiration you have for your life. What do you imagine, or what was your dream for yourself as a child? If you can write that down, like, get it out of yourself. But sometimes I get it, we have to navigate that harsh inner critic because that voice kicks off. And I believe the only way to overcome is to face the fear. So the very thing that you are avoiding, the very thing that you do not want to do, the very thing that fills you with dread is the thing you need to do. Which is why if you saw my newsletter this month, which was about trouble at carnival, I'm talking about the reasons why I've decided to go in costume next year. And that's related to body image issues that I go into depth about in my newsletter. So if you're interested in that, do check the Key for Change page or my personal page. It's also in the Feel Loved group. So the reason I am incredibly passionate about helping you to feel good, because it sets the tone for the quality of our life. And if you're a parent, an adult, I'm a parent, you know, we're adults here, presumably, you know, how we feel about ourselves also sets the tone for our children and the relationships that we have around us. You know, so not only does feeling good enough, you know, increasing our feeling good enough have an impact on us, but it also enhances the lives of others. I've just realized I'm actually not asking anyone for any questions. So if there are any questions, it's coming up, it's past now. Your girl Key is getting thirsty. I'll keep talking for another 5. But if you have any burning questions, or if you want to inbox me because you don't want to go public, that's absolutely fine. Just inbox me. My laptop is open here and working for now. Your girl Key is due an upgrade. And yeah, we're going in. I'm going to invest because, you know, Key for Change, it needs a decent computer to run the empire your girl Key has created from the dust. We give thanks for that. So, you know, if you're someone that has never felt good enough, I totally get it. And I think, as I am someone who's journeyed, I don't see my profession as separate from myself. I see it as something that, you know, I've journeyed through it. And so I'm very, very hot on when not feeling good enough starts to show up. And I'm very much interested in building a relationship with that part of you, as well as building that part of a relationship with myself. Because what having my dreams and continuously pushing myself beyond the limits, beyond the limitations that I'd set for myself, has meant that, you know, my life has changed exponentially in ways I could never imagine. Like, some days I have to just stop and like pause and be like, wow. And that's one of the reasons, if you've ever been to my Feel Loved workshop, or if you're in the Feel Loved WhatsApp group, your girl Key has the victory bell. And the reason why the victory bell is an important part of how I celebrate victories and celebrate triumphs is because we can play down our victories. We sideline them, we make them small. And I do this. This is something I still have to be very mindful of. And my coach, Helena Holrick, you know, pulls me up about that. And, you know, even my assistants, you know, Michelle, Claire, Karen, are very good at encouraging me in order to like be like, you know what, Key, you know, you're doing well. Don't be so harsh on yourself. And so it's just really a beautiful thing that actually when you work on yourself, you know, other people see the work that you've done and they can also big you up, especially people who've journeyed with me, you know, for a long time, who know, you know, exactly the lowest points that I've come from. And so I believe, you know, I absolutely fundamentally believe that you can change. I fundamentally believe that in spite of the sticky situation that you're in, where you can't see a way out, a way can be found. But I do believe that you get that sense by breaking the isolation of being alone. And I have been so privileged to witness people right in front of my eyes who felt baffled, confused, alone, isolated, thought that they were going mad. I've watched like color come back in their face as they've realized, oh, I get it now. Like that makes sense, you know. And I draw as well, so I have to plot things because I'm a visual learner. You know, when you go to school, it's taught often for a particular mindset. People who are great at memory recall benefit from the traditional school system. Someone with the way that I'm wired, I didn't benefit from that. It didn't work for the creative mind that I have been blessed with. So that's another reason why I came out of school not feeling good enough, feeling like I was dumb or I wasn't bright. Actually, I'm a very bright individual, but the schooling system didn't provide the tools, or the learning style didn't work for me. So naturally, you know, I'm going to start looking out the window because I need hands-on learning. Give me hands-on learning. Your girl's involved, which is exactly what I got when I did my master's. It was experiential learning. Experiential learning means that you're applying the learning through experience. And that's how a girl who leaves school with no GCSEs and encouragement to basically go and find a job, goes from that to then, you know, graduating, doing a master's, opening her own business, and voila, here's your girl today. And I'm an absolute firm believer that if I can change, you can change too. And what you need, which is what I benefited from, and I'm not here to say that my way is the only way, there are other ways, but clearly I'm going to be biased to what's worked for me in my life, to getting me from rock bottom to I feel like I want to say sky's the limit, but when I say that, I could hear my inner critic coming in. You see, there it is, sky's the limit. It's saying, what do you mean sky's the limit? Who do you think you are? And then you can answer back your inner critic by saying a statement that you find helpful. Thank you, sister. I'll say, I am a child of the Creator. There you go, in your face. And that is another thing that I encourage people to think about, is your inner critic kicks off, goes on the rampage, and you don't argue it, but argue back with it. I argue back with mine. It's like being bullied, one-way bullying. You bully me, you believe that voice, and you concede, and then you go into your little box. Now, developing an articulate language, communication with that part of yourself has been fundamental to where I've got today, because I'm here to tell you, sometimes that voice doesn't go away. I know if I level up, 3, 2, 1, I can cue the inner critic. It will start to come along and will start to say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, because that's its purpose. But I no longer believe it, and I also answer it back. And my statement is that I am a child of the Creator. Don't get better than that, does it? I mean, come on. What's a comeback? I don't think there is one. So guys, it's now 21:37. Your girl Key got up today at 7, and I've been on the go. If you have any questions or you want to inbox me, like, feel free. But I've decided I'm gonna bring my live to a close, and I want to thank you, all 5 of you, because 5 people is 5 lives, and 5 lives impact on many. This is not about numbers. This is about lives. And if I think about 5 lives and the 5 people that you interact with, you know, and if you change, that ripple effect in terms of your friends or your family, on your confidence, or who those 5 people, if you start to take steps to build your dream, the people that you could impact on. So we give thanks, and I'm grateful for those 5 lives for tuning in. And Christine, you're most welcome. And I appreciate you, and I appreciate that, because your girl Key was going to go home. I was like, oh, you know what, I'm going to shop and go home. But I thought, no, I'm making a commitment. Tuesdays, I do Facebook Lives. So I just want to thank you for even hearing me out. Like I said, I'm passionate about helping people to become their greatest self. And in order to do that, we need to start to look at the way you talk to yourself. And if you're awful and you're unkind to yourself, let that voice know that Auntie Keeley is going to be on your case, because we won't tolerate that. You are worthy of better. You are worthy of kindness and compassion, and the decency that you treat others, especially if you've had some bozo in your life who's treated you like rubbish. We need to start to take care of ourselves and put ourselves first, and say encouraging, non-judgmental statements to ourselves, in order to give us the space to grow into the person that you want to be. Rome was not built in a day. Your girl Key didn't get here in no quick fashion. It's been a long, hard road, and there's been many sacrifices that I have had to make. But it's all been worth it, because I am authentic, I am my genuine self, and I live a very blessed life. And your situation too can change. It can change, and if you're willing to, I'm more than happy to support you. But let me be clear, Your harsh inner critic, that internal voice, is key. And if you are rotten with yourself, we have to go there. We go where we don't want to go. But that's the way we grow. Boom. Love that. Have a good night. Thank you. And feel free to share with your friends and foes. Take care of you. Because if you don't, the bozo won't. For shizzle, manizzle.